You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I'm excited to have Genevieve Wood back with us from the Heritage Foundation. And, of course, we love the Heritage Foundation. We so much enjoy when we go down there to broadcast, and we have so many experts for many years now from you guys, and we thank you for the participation that you share with us on the program. So welcome back.
Well, thank you very much.
Now, we could probably spend about a week discussing this particular issue because it is completely out of control, but I also think it's something that, well, for one, the Heritage Foundation has been at the forefront of covering this particular topic and offering solutions and suggestions of how to deal with the immigration issues and immigration law. But right now, it seems to me we have a lot of lawlessness going on and almost an impotent Congress and an administration in dealing with the issues that we see right now.
Well, I think to a great extent you're right on that. This is a topic that I think many people have paid attention to from time to time, but because of all the recent influx, frankly, of those coming across the southern border very recently, I think more people nationally are paying attention than they have in the past.
Yeah, that I agree with. I have an immediate question, and when we look at the immigration laws themselves, I've been told by many an immigration attorney that we actually have, for the most part, I mean, of course, there's little problems here and there, and some a little bit bigger than little, but we have a lot of laws that would work if they were simply followed, and they feel as though we have too many sanctuary cities that ignore them, or even the federal government, which in many cases ignores the laws which are existing, or which are in place.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think this has been there's a number of things that are contributing to the problem that we have today that we've had just generally in securing our borders. But there's no doubt that this administration's basically decision to enforce the laws that they like and not to enforce the laws that they don't like when it comes to immigration policy is a real problem. There was the DREAM Act, which many folks that listen to your show may be familiar with. This was legislation put before Congress a couple of years ago. They were not able to get it through, and it's dealt a lot with what do you do with those who are already here in the country, and should we be giving people who are going to college here, for example, or signing up for military service, should we be giving them some sort of legal status or delaying their deportation? Congress wouldn't pass it, but the president liked it. And so instead of saying, well, okay, I'll have to wait till I can convince enough people, both in Congress and the national public, to get behind this, I'm just going to, kind of his infamous, I'll pick up my phone and pen and do it my way. And, put forward an executive order that was really it's called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. He did this back in 2012 and said, some children who were brought here prior to 2007, we're going to delay any deportation for them. Well, that message and that kind of activity has gotten into Central America, certainly gotten into Mexico, and it's caused many people outside of this country to believe, look, if we can just get into the U.S., they're going to let us stay. And eventually they're going to give us some sort of legal status or allow us to become citizens. A lot of talk of amnesty, I think, has driven that. And so I think that is the reason you're seeing the huge influx that you're seeing right now.
Yeah. So here's a few questions or thoughts that I have on this issue. One is, it always troubles me when Congress doesn't properly enforce the laws, meaning when the administration, regardless of who's in office, whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration, when they get out of line and expand their powers, if you will, why the Congress just, they'll take to the airwaves and gripe about it, but they never really do anything about it, and I think that's why we see the continued abuse. And I can't remember ever seeing it abused as much as we do during this administration. The other thing is that when I look at the laws that we put in place, I always thought the laws are supposed to either protect the people or to do some sort of a common good. And with regards to the immigration laws, I don't see how letting hundreds of thousands or millions of people who we know nothing about cross our borders illegally and give them, in some cases, more rights than we afford many Americans. So I'm trying to figure out how this is a benefit to our country by just allowing anyone to come here when they want illegally and eventually saying, fine, you could stay here.
Well, you're absolutely right. Look, I mean, we have to be able to secure our border. If we say that we're a country that's based on the rule of law, that we have laws that people have to obey, and you don't get to pick and choose which ones you like and only obey those, if we're going to be that kind of country, then we have to be that kind of country. And in this particular arena, that's not what's going on. I mean, it's not just what I mentioned earlier about the childhood or the childhood arrival law, or not law, just executive order that President Obama put forth, but it's also the fact, we have so many people who've come into the country, and that the president, under his administration, has deported fewer people than any time since 1973. Now, they claim differently, but that's the fact. They have deported fewer people since anyone since 1973. Well, that says to people outside the country who want to come here, and there are millions who would like to come here, that, hey, we can get in, we can stay, we can, let's go now. And I think that's one reason you're seeing this huge, it's one of the main reasons you're seeing this huge increase.
Genevieve, there is a very significant ethical issue here, particularly with the children. But the question I have for you is, have the Republicans themselves surrendered the moral high ground on this issue because of, let's call it, fear of the electoral implications? And if that's the case, is it likely to even work to their best interest?
You mean in terms of electorally, does it work to their interest?
Well, yeah, because there's an ethical issue here, not just the sense of the children, the violation of our laws and the things that you and Brett have just discussed, but typically we like to think of the Republican Party as having somewhat the moral high ground when it comes to constitutional values, putting law above politics, etc. But this appears to be a game where most of, and I think it's part of the reason, of course, why Cantor may have lost, where the Republicans have surrendered that moral high ground because of fear of the electoral implications on both midterms and perhaps the next presidential election. I mean, that's my...
Yeah, no, I think there's no doubt that's been an issue. I mean, the fact is you've had a lot of Republicans talking about this, ideas of pathway to citizenship. And remember the Gang of Eight bill that was put forward in the Senate? There were a lot of Republicans who were behind that. Folks talking about amnesty, that we just have to go ahead and deal with the fact we've got 10 or 12 million folks living here illegally, and why don't we just give them some sort of pathway to citizenship unless they've, committed some sort of heinous criminal act. And the reality is, again, that is not the rule of law. That the rule of law is if you come to this country illegally, or you come on a visa legally and you overstay it, there's penalty for that, and that that's not fair to treat those people and give them access to citizenship or some form of legal status when you have millions of people standing in line trying to get in the right way. Now, I would argue, yes, we need to reform our immigration system. It's very bureaucratic. It makes it very hard to get in the country. I'm not saying it should be easy, but I think in some cases we make it harder and longer than it needs to be. But that aside, you can fix that without saying we're going to reward the behavior of those who've come in illegally. And I think a lot of Republicans, because they're worried, what is this going to say to the Hispanic community here? Are we going to lose their vote? Well, when you look at some of the polls, and not that you should make judgments by polls, but just look at some of those. Most of the people that are living in this country legally, Hispanics, do believe people should have to follow the law to get here. They don't believe that just because you happen to be Hispanic, you should just be able to come. So I think even from a political standpoint, if people are willing to articulate the message and why, they don't have to be fearful of that, but I think many have been.
I think you're spot on regarding the fairness factor or lack of fairness, but I also would like you to address what that says, not just to the immigrants who've waited in line, but what about to Americans? If you look, for example, at the impact this has on the job market, both from a perspective of Americans who are desperately in need of jobs, as well as an American economy that can no longer afford the giant safety net that we're already paying for. And every time, and it feels like a double dip here, right? You bring people in to replace American workers, and then on the flip side of that, we pay those American workers to stay home and not work under the guise of, Americans aren't willing to do that job. So to me, it feels like this is unfair to all Americans.
Well, last time I checked, we're over $17 trillion in debt. We said that we had a huge health care problem in this country, that many people were uninsured, and we're trying to fix that. Supposedly that's what Obamacare was going to do, and I know that's a different topic and program. We won't get into that. But the point being, that's expensive. And yet all the people that are flooding in right now, and I was in McAllen this past weekend, and I got into a facility where over 800 folks who had recently crossed were being held. And I will tell you, these are folks who, in many cases, are not going to be highly skilled. They don't have college degrees, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not their fault. But when they come into this country, what they're going to get is what I think you just were pointing to. They're immediately going to get into government programs, whether it's food stamps, Medicaid, all the things that cost a lot of money that we're already having trouble paying for with our current legal population. And so this is going to exacerbate the problem, which in the long run isn't going to be good for the very people who are coming here. I think many of them wanting to participate in the American dream, but they're going to get stuck in the welfare system and programs. And so that's not good for current citizens, and it's not good for those who want to be citizens.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. I kind of sum up the immigration problem as an issue of economics, because people wouldn't want to come here if it weren't for economic issues, unless, of course, they were coming here because they wanted to be with family. In other words, if their prior family had moved to America and they simply wanted to try to join or reestablish the ties with family. But really, when you look at the economics of it, I try to understand why, as a nation, we don't focus more in Central and South America, and even North America for that matter, in trying to create better trade agreements and trying to encourage better governance in the other nations. And I mean, we spend so much effort propping up other continents, and we ignore what happens here at home. And I think that's
our own backyard.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And it adds to our own problems, because the more people who flee places that, I mean, there's no reason for some of these other countries. I understand they don't have everything we do or other nations do to be incredibly prosperous, but they can do much better than they are, and there could be more opportunity, and there could certainly be less drugs and fewer gangs and less violence and some of the upheaval that goes on. And I don't think we do anything whatsoever to confront that issue.
Well, no, there's a foreign policy component to this. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we should be working more closely to influence the governments, whether it be in Honduras or Guatemala or Salvador, either supporting efforts and helping them in fighting the drug cartels and the crime areas there, and ensuring that they have what they need, because that's protecting our border and it's protecting our people. I mean, this is where the drugs are coming through and coming from. So I think there's definitely more things we could do in the foreign policy side in that range, but we also have to be firm with those governments and say, if your people come, and I will tell you, every single person I talked to that worked in this issue in McAllen, Border Patrol agents, people at the Texas Department of Public Safety, they all to a person said the same thing. The only way we're going to turn this tide is if we actually deport people and send them home. He said, if people come across, we obviously have to apprehend them, we process them, find out where they're from, who they're with, but then within a day or two, they need to be put on a plane or a bus, whatever the vehicle may be, and sent back to their country. And until we start doing that, and we can do that, we have done that with Mexico. We have done that with in countries like Brazil. We had a problem in 2006 with a lot of Brazilians flooding across. Everybody there told me as soon as planes started going back, sending people back home, literally it dried up immediately in terms of people crossing over from Brazil. So, but we're not doing that right now. And, so I think we could be doing more internally with those countries to help them have better systems where they have stronger countries where they are. But we also have to realize, even if those countries are never perfect, no country is, we still can't just allow people to come as they're coming now. We have to have agreements with those countries that we're sending people back.
Sure. I just have one last question with you in the time we have left today. And I want to just make sure that I understand this, because this administration has made claims that they've deported more people than prior administrations.
Right.
The numbers are up. But to me, it seems to be a game of which perhaps this administration is letting more people cross the border so we could process them and then send them back, as opposed to prior administrations which just would have had better security and fewer people would have crossed. Could you give us a little bit of background
Sure,
on
yeah. Well, they're using maybe not funny math, but different math. The way this administration is counting numbers, they're counting those who are, you're right, apprehended right at the border and turned around and sent home. So people who come in from Mexico, let's say, and we just basically within a day turn around and send them back. That's not the way administrations in the past have counted deportations. Deportations are people who are living in this country illegally, who have been here for, whether it's a week or 2 years, and where we identify them and we send them home. That's a true deportation. This administration has the lowest numbers of anyone since 1973 in actually doing that. No administrations in the past counted those that were confronted immediately and turned right around. Their deportation numbers were based on those who were living inside the country and rounded up and sent home. But this administration isn't doing that. They are not. I mean, and that's one of the I think the things that people need to know about those that are coming across right now. They're coming across. They're basically being told once a family member is identified in this country, okay, you have let's say you have a mother in Baltimore, and we send you to Baltimore, and you're given a note saying once you get there, you're supposed to show up at the immigration office within 3 days and let them know you're there so they can start your deportation process. Okay, does anybody really believe the majority of folks are showing up in 3 days and saying, oh yeah, please start my deportation process? The vast majority are not. So they just start going, there they are now living in Baltimore, and no one is really following up on their cases. Very, very few of those ever get followed up on.
Yeah, two quick follows are, when this administration reports the number, are they separating how many of each type there are? In other words, how many deportations are people who just came over the recent days? Or how many deportations of people that they've found, like you said, living somewhere amongst America? And then the other quick question would be...
and the quick answer to that is no, they're not. They're lumping them together, and they're reporting very few internally. Almost all the deportations with this administration have been those that are right at the border and just turned around.
That's a major problem. So, and then just the last question. It seems to me, and I'm sorry, that's just so important to mention this, and it slipped my mind, but this administration seems to be taking people from that are in this recent group of people, particularly these young kids, and it's like they're busing or planing or putting them on trains to other cities and states around the country. And to me, it's the government almost making a decision to impact those particular local, state, and the federal economy. And I don't see how they have the authority to say, hey, we're sending 20,000 people to Maryland or 15,000 to California or wherever it may be.
Well, I think there's two things going on there. I mean, the folks coming across right now, almost all of them have, a phone number of some relative that lives in the United States that they say they're trying to meet with. So if it's an unaccompanied child, a parent or both parents are here. And keep in mind, many of them are coming to meet relatives who are already living here illegally, okay? So we're matching them up with people that we know are living here illegally. We're reunifying the family, so to speak, and then letting everybody stay. I mean, just think about that for a second. They come across, they're illegal, they've got a phone number. Here's, mom and dad are living in Baltimore, wherever it happens to be. We make sure that they get there. We find the parents. We know that they're both also here illegally, and we're just letting everybody stay now. I mean, that's what's going on. And then in other cases, the feds are supposed to, the Texas Border Patrol and Texas Department of Public Safety, they can't handle all these folks. So the ICE and HHS that are responsible for housing these people until they're either deported or put with family members, they have facilities around the country. And that's why you're seeing people shipped to different states and different localities for those two reasons.
This whole story is just incredible. And I really wish, I'm sure you would agree, that the people that we're relying upon down in Washington, D.C., in the Congress and this administration could be adults and actually sit down and without trying to pass some overwhelming immigration policy or reform, would at least address this particular issue in a meaningful manner that was to the benefit of our nation. But I'm going to hold my breath.
The problem is, I think that you have people on, there's people on two sides of this, and on one side are those who truly are for amnesty. And that's why they don't really want to talk about securing the border first, which is what I believe that we should do. I mean, until you have a secure border, how can you ever talk about this other stuff when you don't even know how many people are coming across a day? Or but they're just flooding in. Well, so at what point do we say, okay, who gets amnesty, who doesn't? And secondly, we've tried that before, and we know it doesn't work. Reagan did that in 86. The whole point then was we're going to give the 3 million folks that are here amnesty, and then we're going to secure the border and not have this problem again. Well, what happened was everybody got amnesty, we never secured the border, and now we have 10 to 12 million people that are here illegally. Some people think the number's even higher. So we can't even say that we haven't tried that. We tried that policy route. Didn't work. But I think there are those who that's really what they want, and so therefore they don't want a step-by-step approach or let's secure the border first. They want to kind of throw everything in together because they know if you do that, the really important measures like securing the border likely won't happen.
I agree with you 100% on that. Well, Genevieve Wood, if you can, please share the website for the Heritage Foundation and anything else that you'd like to promote. And we thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. I would just encourage folks to check out our new multi-news platform, which is the Daily Signal. Just go to dailysignal.com, where we report on this issue, but obviously a host of other issues that are happening in Washington and around the country. So dailysignal.com, and of course you can always go to heritage.org to get just our policy research.
Great, excellent, and thank you so much, and we look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.